Hey gang, and welcome to another exciting episode of Zoology Online, and today we're going to talk about the phylum Porifera. So many of you know that Porifera is the phylum that contains all of the sponges, and sponges are actually animals, which if you look at them, they don't really look much like animals, but if you compare them to the other phylogenetic groups, they're not fungi, they're not plants, they're not protists, they're not any type of the bacteria. And they definitely have eukaryotic cells. So they actually fall into the animal kingdom. And one of the things that's neat about Porifera is that their name means hole bearing. And they're full of holes, they're full of pores. You can see from the pictures, that's true. Look at all those holes that are all over the place. So essentially, sponges are our simplest form of animals. A little bit later, we'll talk about their origins and where they came, where they think to have evolved from. But essentially, they are types of animals, and they're the simplest, least complex type of animal that we know of. Essentially, all of them are going to be filter feeders, which there's a bunch of different types of sponges, but all of them filter feed, meaning that they strain, in this case, seawater or just water. They strain the water and get any type of organic material and bits out of the water, and they will absorb that into their body and use for nutrients and for energy. They have a very loose body arrangement. There's no tissue and there's no organs in sponges, which is really weird to think of, but really they're just a loose connection of cells that work together. It's really neat. You can take a sponge and you can put it in a blender and blend it up, and the cells that weren't broken down by the blender will actually recongregate into a sponge, which is really, really neat because they're so simple. And because there's no tissue or organs, the cells are able to act independently of each other. Now, they do rely on each other for certain things, but they don't necessarily, it's not like one can't live without the other. They can keep on going. So what are some of the types of cells that they have? So they do have what's an epidermis, a coating on the outside made of pianocytes, which are just a thin, flat cell that covers the outside, forming a quote-unquote skin. Just a covering on the outside that helps protect their insides from the external environment. They do have spicules, and they in some cases use a form of collagen for support. Spicules are like really hard structures, kind of like a lattice work or a scaffolding, if you would, and then the collagen it just kind of fills in some of the in-between, but it's all used as support. Some can be bent, some are a little harder, but that's how they essentially maintain their structure and stand up underwater. Again, like I said earlier, the cells act independently of each other, and it's important to notice that the response to stimuli is independent for each cell because there's no nervous system. They don't all react together to the same stimuli. If something does something to one particular cell, then just that one cell will respond. So the reaction is always going to be localized. Now, because they are very, very simple, they actually can reproduce sexually and asexually, which is very unique for the animal kingdom. Usually it's one or the other, and they can, depending on their species, can reproduce in a variety of different ways within sexual and asexual reproduction. One of the other big things is that the adult form is always going to be sessile, and sessile is a word that means that it just stays in one spot and doesn't move for its life. For example, trees are sessile. All plants are sessile. They don't get up and move around. So they're not mobile, they're sessile. There's a little over 5,000 marine species and about 150 freshwater species of sponges. Most of the ones that we'll look at are actually going to be marine. We'll take a small look at some of the freshwater ones. But yeah, that's some of the generalized information about sponges. They're the simplest type of animal that we have and that we know of. And that actually gives them some very unique and weird properties and things that they do. So let's look at the form and function. Like I said earlier, they're the sessile, and they feed by filter feeding. So they're going to constantly want to pump water through their bodies, and different things happen when the water goes through and help them get the food out. So water flows in through an opening called an ostium. It then flows through a series of canals into which is called a spongocycle, which is this big central cavity that's located in the middle of sponges. And different species have them in different locations and different size and different canal systems, but they all have internal cavities. And inside these cavities, these holes, these are called the osculums. This is where most of the water and the filtration is going to occur. So they have cells called choanocytes. Choanocyte just means collared cell, and they're the cells that actually will filter out the water. The little collar acts like a net and grabs particles out of the water as they pass by. It will then absorb them and use them for food or nutrition. There are 3 different types of sponges based on their canal systems that they use. There's asconoid, synconoid, and leuconoid. The asconoid, their collar cells are in the spongocycle, that big internal cavity, the big main cavity that's there. For synconoids, the collar cells are in the channels that lead to the spongocycle. And the leuconoids, they have chambers along those canals that lead to the spongocycle, and that's where you'll find their collar cells. So it has to do with their canal systems and where the choanocytes are within those canals. Digestion is internal, not meaning that there's like a stomacher inside. It's just that digestion occurs inside of the cells. So as the nutrition and the food is brought in and absorbed into the individual cell, the cell then breaks it down. And there is a special type of cell that actually helps break down and spread nutrition between some of the internal and external cells to help make sure we spread the nutrients around a little bit. They actually help each other out, which is really neat. But there's no blood circulatory system, there's no respiratory system or anything like that. There's not even an excretory system. So respiration and excretion occurs simply through diffusion. And this is a common theme that we see with a lot of very uncomplicated animals. The less complication they have, generally the less systems that they have, so things like cellular waste still needs to be removed, and oxygen and nutrients need to get into the cell. So they simply rely off the process of diffusion. Objects or molecules moving from high concentration to an area of low concentration in order to get what they need and to get rid of what they need to get rid of. Sponges are pretty daggum cool.